Yeah.
Because your outcome should be no different than, what would you say, Brett? No different what we did with Jerome or did with Tehran or we did with um Wilson. The outcome should be the same. End up 50-50 time or equal time sharing, the deviation if necessary, but in many cases it comes down to little or no support. And as Brett most famously brought to my attention, what, Brett, which we know that you guys don't get credit for, is that insurance thing.
Yeah. And
That's huge.
my thing, G, is this. Like, you take Anthony Edwards' child, take my child, and anybody else, or just, let's say a guy who makes $50,000 a year. If there's a certain amount of money to be able to raise a child from birth to 18, right? Like, how much money does that take? Because when you look at these situations, you're like, well, why does it take $3 million to raise this child and $40,000 to raise that one? You get what I'm saying? Like, when you look,
Well, the
go ahead.
is you're saying why does it take this much? The question is, what does that? Okay, this is going to sound horrible.
We're
Go ahead.
used to it.
Go ahead, Squid.
Hey, I told my ball player, I said, man, you don't owe this chick no fucking living. She
That's
had
what
a
I'm saying.
baby. So fucking what? You had a baby. Listen. You It was a screw. I'm trying to clean it up. You don't owe her a lifestyle for some ass. Are we serious?
That's what I'm getting down to.
That's what needs to be said. I owe you a lifestyle for some ass. And if it comes down to that, and I don't know how many guys took Ant's position, but you don't have to take Anthony's position. You can just say, okay, we're both parents. And bitch, if you ain't got a good enough job, give me the child, kick rocks. If it comes down to that, particularly when the means are there. If you guys have, and there's a couple of guys on this panel too, or that are part of our group that make pretty good money. You really don't, especially, you don't really need her to do anything that you can't do for yourself. So why would you owe her? Now, if you were divorced and maybe they could argue, okay, I was with you for X number of years and I gave up this. There's some arguments that could be made, but I've been inside of too many hearings and I read too many or seen too many cases where I don't believe that a lot of the discussions that should have been had leading up to whatever the result was or the settlement agreement was. I'm like, they weren't having real conversations about the children. It was somehow it always came down to money, and everybody got paid except for the guy getting stiff. Now you have more women in these situations, and I would advocate for them as well. You don't owe this dude no living.
Yeah, I agree. I agree on both sides.
Unless you agree to give them a living. Any of our professional guys want to comment on that? And y'all know who I'm talking about, my math guys. Any of y'all want to comment on it?
Yeah, I'll comment on it.
Yeah.
It's very simple. You have option A, you have option B. The child support is calculated based on the differences of income and differences in sharing schedule. So if the option A is the lower income earner has more time sharing, that would mean more child support being paid to that individual. If you have the flip side of that, which is option B, and the much higher earner, they get full custody, let's say, because clearly the other parent can't afford to raise a child, then clearly the lower income earner isn't going to be paying the higher income earner any child support. In option B, there's no necessity for the government to get involved.
No support, Brett? Or
No,
lower support?
no support. I mean, depending on the situation, it could be that, even though technically the lower income earner theoretically should be paying child support, it could amount to nothing at all. So if the federal government is providing the state governments child support recoupment payments through Title 4D, But if you choose option B and nobody's really having to pay child support, then there's nothing to recuperate. Therefore, there's no federal money coming into the state. Therefore, option B is the most attractive option for the state. The more that they can say that one party needs to collect child support, and then they insert themselves into the equation and say, well, yeah, we're going to make sure this parent gets the child support that they deserve. The more they can justify, the more money they are bringing into the system, and the more then they can tell the federal government, hey, we need more aid because we're having to collect all this child support. So the system is very clearly focused on driving the need for more child support versus doing the logical thing. If the high income earner wanted to just take the kid and pay everything and have the kid live with them, there'd be no need for the state. So it's an adversarial system from the beginning. It's set up to be that way, and the state is incentivized not to treat each parent equal. They're incentivized to treat them differently, and hopefully have the low income earner have more time sharing schedule, therefore receive more child support. And when you're talking about huge disparities in income, like the professional athletes, and we were just talking about a second ago, where you don't owe that person a living just because you had sex and a baby was born. But because they're incentivized to collect as much child support, clearly there's no incentive for either the federal government or the state governments to limit the amount of child support that can be paid. I think there's some states that do. California, I believe, is one of them, or maybe it's Texas. That's Texas. But I mean, if you just look at the system analytically like that, it's completely designed to create disparity between the parents and
Foster the
ultimately,
adversity. What you're saying, they're fostering the adversity.
absolutely. And I
Adversarial
mean,
relationship.
the attorneys aren't helping either, but that because of
The
the
opinions do not reflect.
well, I mean, it's an adversarial system, right? But since the calculation is um, based on time sharing and income, that's essentially where it leads. I mean, people fight over the money, right? So that's where the adversarial system comes into play. They're fighting over the money, and the fight is over um, the differences in income and the difference in time sharing.
A lot is, I typically step in and say speculation. I get it because I know how it works. Because at one time, Pat Frank sued the United States government for unpaid funds for child support processing. And so I can see where there's a compensation, which, Florida's Constitution expressly states there should be a code of ethics to help distinguish between private interest and public responsibility when it comes to doing these things. I don't know for sure that is happening the way that it should. But again, the cases that we're talking about are cases where I'm talking about some non-4D cases, especially non-4D cases, where
Right.
like there would Mike's teammate, and I noticed, we went to the other side. I'm like, well, this is a non-4D case.
But
Your case,
they still refer you to the distribution unit. So that distribution unit is overseen by the Department of Revenue for each county. And of course, the Department of Revenue is the one that has the contract with the federal government with respect to Title 4D and other welfare programs. So it all rolls up to the same place, even though it may not be called a 4D case. Essentially, they're forcing it into that system.
so you're saying they're gonna turn it over to that system.
Yes.
Now, the interesting thing to me is, okay, and I can only speak to Florida, and if you don't live in Florida, that's your own fault.